Welcome to Using the Roud Indexes Part 1, brought to you by the Traditional Song Forum, and if you'd like to know more about them, go to www.tradsong.org. In this part, we're going to be talking in general about the Roud indexes, their background, philosophy behind them, and what goes in and what doesn't. Part 2, we're going to look a bit more closely at what's in there. 3, 4 and 5 will cover searching and other advanced techniques. Now this particular one will be mainly me talking, but the others will be a bit more exciting because we'll have something to show. Now there are 3 ways of accessing the indexes. First one and most important one is online on the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library website, which you'll be seeing a lot of during these tutorials. VWML host my indexes very kindly, but they also have lots of other stuff on there of their own materials, their own catalogues and indexes, and all their digitized manuscripts and sound recordings and things. So that site is a major resource for traditional song material. We'll be looking at that a lot during these tutorials. But the second way of getting to the indexes is for home use. So when I produce a new version, which is every 2 or 3 months, I mount it on a shared drive, and then anybody who's interested can download it for free. It's already formatted for an Excel spreadsheet and for the Cardbox database program, which I recommend, but also as a file that can be imported into any reasonable database package like Access or FileMaker. So for heavy users, super users, that's a good option in that it gives you full control over the data, and if you know how to use your own package, then it's the most powerful way of accessing the material. The third way is part of the US-based Traditional Ballad Index. Now, I won't be talking much about them because we hope that they will do their own tutorial videos for this series, but just to say here that the Ballad Index covers much the same ground as my indexes, but in a very different way. And some people prefer their way, some people prefer my way, some people like both. So you can access my material through them at the web address that's shown just there. Now there are actually 5 of my indexes available on the VWML site. They're listed here, but the most important that we're going to be talking about during these tutorials is the folk song index and the broadside index. They're backed up with a bibliography, stroke discography, and then there are 2 others, the printer's register and street literature bibliography. So those last 3 we'll talk about in tutorial part 5 when we're tying up the loose ends, as it were. From now on, we'll be talking about folk song index and broadside index. Now, when people use the term Roud index, they normally mean the folk song index. And that's where I put songs which are traditional. In other words, songs where there's evidence that ordinary people sang them in their ordinary lives and passed them on amongst themselves. Now, there's no strict definition for folk song, never will be. And all experts will disagree with me and with each other on definition. But basically, that's what it is. If ordinary people sang the song and they liked it enough to pass it on between themselves, then to me that's a folk song, or a better word is traditional song, and it goes into the index. Now the broadside index, I can put anything in there, but most of it is songs that are found on street literature. In other words, broadsides, chapbooks, songsters, songbooks, and then for the more well-off people, sheet music and proper songbooks, or even early recordings. So really the Broadside Index is an index to popular songs of the past, some of which became folk songs, some of them didn't. Now, if you're not sure what broadsides and chapbooks are, we'll have a short explanation for those, well, a short display of broadsides at the end of this video. So the further criteria for what goes into the folk song index, well, and the broadside index for that matter, is that they have to be in the English language. You can't index things that you don't understand, but they can be from anywhere in the world. So English songs from the USA, from Britain and Ireland, from Canada, Australia, West Indies, anywhere else they're found as long as they're in English. But I'm interested in songs only for these indexes. I don't index instrumental music, unless, of course, it's the tune for a song. And I don't do dances and that other kinds of musical tradition. It's got to be a song to be included. But song is interpreted fairly widely in that a children's game with a sung or recited text can go in here. Recitations and monologues can go in. But primarily it is songs, and it's primarily text-based rather than musical-based. Now I do say in my index if the music is present in the book that I'm indexing, but I don't go into detail about the music in the same way as I might about the text. Now, more controversially, I include traditional songs and not revival songs. Now, anyone who's been around in the folk scene for a while will know what I mean by that, even if they disagree with where the line should be drawn, or if any line should be drawn. But to me, the traditional songs are the ones from, in effect, from before the Second World War, and some things after the Second World War. But once the revival kicks in from the 1950s, I'm not interested in indexing that material. So if you're looking for performances by Ewan MacColl or Fairport Convention or Steel Eye Span or the Spinners or Pete Seeger or Joan Baez or Bob Dylan, anything like that is not included. There are other places to go for that material. Right from the beginning, the indexes have been multimedia in that they started off indexing books and journals and LPs at the time, but then they soon moved on to include manuscripts, and other sound recordings came along like CDs and videos, and then unpublished sound collections, newspapers, broadside songsters, we've talked about those. All of those materials can be included in the index, and increasingly I index other people's websites, and this is very important because it's moved the indexes from an old-fashioned finding aid into what we would now call a hub or portal, in that there are thousands and thousands of songs now on other people's websites, and it's pointless for me to restrict myself to the books, to the physical books, if those same songs can be found on the web elsewhere. So I will give URL links to other people's websites, and in fact I index other people's indexes to bring all of the material into one place. So just to vary the screen a bit, we'll scroll through some of the sites that I index. That's the VWML website, Irish Traditional Music Archive, British Library Sounds, World and Traditional Music, but of course I won't do the world, I'll do the English language ones only. School of Scottish Studies, 50,000 recordings on there. broadside ballad online from the Bodleian Library, 30,000 broadside songs. And then American ones like the Ozark Folk Song Collection, and Canadian ones like the Ontario Traditional Music Library, and so on. Now there's one more important aspect of the indexes that should be flagged up here right at the beginning, and that's what's called the Roud Numbers, which are integral to the way the whole system works. Now folk songs, traditional songs, have cause a problem for indexers and cataloguers because their titles are slippery, unstable. The same song can have literally dozens of different titles, and alternatively the same title can refer to more than one song. So what we've got here is a list of titles that this particular song goes under. You might know it as Blackjack Davy, or Gypsy Laddie, or Raggle-Taggle Gypsies, or Seven Yellow Gypsies. And this is only a quarter of the titles that you can find this song under, which is absolutely hopeless for searching and for identifying things. So what I do, and the system that I invented, is that when I come across versions of the same song, now whenever people like us use the phrase same song, we put the same in inverted commas because they're not exactly the same. They will be versions of a song, sometimes quite different, sometimes almost exactly the same. They may even be to a completely different tune. But for most of the folk song corpus, you can get 2 or 3 or 4 versions together, put them side by side and say, yeah, this seems to be the same song, and probably comes from an original ancestor, and they are all children or grandchildren from that original. So if it's the same song, I give it the same number. Now this particular song is number 1. So if you want to get all the versions of this song, you go on to the database, you find, by looking at the title that you do know, you find the Roud number, in this case number 1, you then do a new search, click on number 1, and it brings together all the versions that we know of. And of course that's not all the versions in the world, it's just that all the versions that we have actually indexed. So the number really is just a grouping aid, it's a finding aid, but it has also developed into an identification aid. And what I mean by that is that a book editor, or somebody who's doing the notes for a CD, or people writing articles, if they want to refer to this song, then they will probably say, and in the Gypsy Laddie, and then they put in brackets Roud number 1. Now that has 2 purposes. Not only does it identify which song the writer is referring to, rather than another song called Gypsy Laddie, so it identifies it, but it also means that that particular writer doesn't need to give details about where the song can be found, and notes as to different versions. They can rely on the fact that people have access to the index and can say, okay, what is Roud number 42? Oh, that's interesting. Go to the index, search for it, and find all the versions. So the indexes have taken on a central role, I believe, in the whole of the folk song research corpus, rather than just as indexes. So that's all from this first part. As I said at the beginning, parts 2 and 3 will take you into more detail. So I'll leave you, as promised, with a few broadsides, penny song sheets sold in the streets and at fairs, just to finish off this video.